Hi everybody. Okay, so I'm going to talk about there's very little in this about costs, and certainly nothing about costs in money terms. But there is always a price to pay for anything that we import. So urban transformation opportunities is what I'm looking at in terms of car parking, and that, I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen this Notre Dame one, but this was considered clearly not a serious conversion for Notre Dame. So, what we're doing in our practice, looking at, we're doing a lot of work on high streets and town centres outside of London, and design and regeneration strategies for those places. And the car is absolutely key to this. So we're taking this approach. We're looking at the 3 Rs: reduce, relocate, and restructure. We're trying to reduce overall vehicle use and reduce that through modal shift, getting people to walk more, making places much better for cyclists. And Chris has just shown us some fabulous slides of walking and cycling places. Though, as somebody said in the chat, not everybody can cycle. Disabled people and elderly people have problems with bicycles. So we do need to think about the opportunities for inclusive access for all. The second, and of course, in smaller towns and cities, getting public transport upgraded is really important, and that's quite problematic in terms of funding that comes in, etc. So the other steps that we take: relocating parking, at grade parking to the fringes of towns, and particularly long-term all-day parking. People often come to work, particularly for the local authorities, we find, and park smack in the middle of their town centres, and the car sits there for 7 hours. It's just it's a storage space, as Chris mentioned. So relocating car parks to the fringes and getting people to walk for 7 minutes rather than 1.5, or using park and ride principles as well, and systems. The other thing in larger areas and as part of a phased process is restructuring parking. So phasing parking removals by consolidating a whole lot of at-grade parking into temporary and potentially relocatable multi-story car parks. Now, as of course we're redeveloping these empty sites, the potential demand for car parking can also increase. So we've got to also look at a completely new approach to how we do new development. Now, next slide, please. I shouldn't spend too long on each of one of these. So the context that we're all working in at the moment: struggling town centre retail, end of life cycle for a lot of 20th century shopping centres, lots of dismal high streets, poor bus services in many places, not everywhere, dangerous cycling infrastructure, increasing housing need. This is another aspect of mixed uses in town centres, underperforming evening and cultural economies, and disregarded or underperforming heritage assets. So next slide. So the direction of travel in terms of modes of movement, unfortunately, the growth of the SUV, and I was reading something that says that SUV sales in the last 10 years have completely cancelled out any gains we've made in terms of shifting to electric vehicles. We've got to completely ban the damn things. So the future of mobility includes behaviour and infrastructure changes: car sharing and renting, modal shift to micromobility, whether that's scooters, cycles, whatever, more micro rental, and of course better public transport, better transit. Next slide. We all need more carrots than sticks. More walkable cities need improved public transport. That's so important. Safer cycle routes, a more and nicer public realm. I want to rehabilitate the word nice. It has a bit of a bad press, but actually we all like nice places and nice things. We do need to adopt higher density development in places where people are maybe not used to it. 2 stories is not a good height for development in any town centre. We need more people to live in town centres, more cultural activities, good adaptive reuse of heritage assets, and more flexible working arrangements with ground floors. A couple of images there. The top one is BBC White City, that wonderful iconic building. This used to be the parking court in the middle. It now looks like a great green square that they've all got. The bottom one is a project we're working on at the moment in Southampton city centre, and what you're looking at there is currently a multi-storey car park. We've proposed the demolition of this for a new development, new public realm, and a new link that doesn't exist through the city. And surprisingly, everybody thinks it's a good idea, apart from the people who have the lease on the car parking building. Next slide, please. So what are the resistors to change? Well, political will is a huge one. And transforming the Male, Pale and Stale councillors and highways officers, I'm terribly sorry to be rude to any highways people who are listening, but we come up against problematic highways people all the time. We need younger and greener councillors, people in power, people who make the decisions, people who sit on planning committees. This is a very general and maybe provocative statement, but I think it would help. The other problem are things like this chap down here on the right, retailers. And all research shows almost inevitably increase in retail turnover if you take the car parks away from out the front of the shop and replace these with trees and more pleasant experiences. However, most retailers will resist this hugely because they believe that if somebody can't park outside their shop, nobody's going to actually come and spend their money. So there's a massive education process needed. Fewer car parks, and of course, as we all know, if living in London, and it's probably happening in the rest of the UK as well, low traffic neighbourhoods have produced enormous fights in various parts of London with the people who want to use their cars and drive them everywhere, kicking up an enormous fuss. And that's indicative of wider issues. Next slide. So a couple of case studies. This is Kings Lynn in Norfolk. Next slide. This is all the at-grade and multi-storey car parks around this rather fantastic heritage town. It's not a city. The most enormous amount of space in the most brilliant town. So, and we were commissioned by the council to look at 7 of these sites, 5 of which were actually at-grade car parks, and what could we do with them. Next slide. This is what they look like. The bottom right is a fantastic square called I think that's the Tuesday Market, which does still have a brilliant market. But even on market day, 50% of the square is still dedicated to car parking and truck parking. And as you can see, these other spaces everywhere. Next slide. So looking at one of the car parking spaces, we did a whole lot of phased processes about development, making reducing the area of parking, getting it into the middle, getting rid of all the longer term car parking, building housing which had fewer car parks for the houses, potentially also looking at a multi-storey car park in the middle there. And the final proposal was just to completely develop it with housing and some street-based unallocated parking. That was one of the options, and that had also fronted onto a little commercial street, so bringing in workspace and uses as well. The next slide. And the context of this is, as you can see, heritage, rather wonderful church, and also some very old buildings with very fine grain footprints all the way around, which used to also occupy this at-grade car park. So trying to replace it with something that kind of respected the scale and form and had a whole lot of similar uses. And this was just an image really to show them. So the next slide. And just to finish up on that, this was a couple of years ago, we finished the Kings Lynn project, and the councillors had a huge problem with it. They wanted us to look at redeveloping all the car park sites, but they wanted to re-provide the car parking and to add other car parking for the development there. So we had the most massive difficulty getting them to understand that you really can't do that, and we wouldn't be achieving anything. But we did identify satellite car parking locations just on the edge of the town, which would have been really good for them to start shifting the parking out. As far as I understand it, they've so far done nothing. And Boston, just up the road or up the river, really, around the coast from Kings Lynn, is in a similar situation, and you can just see from this aerial photograph how much car parking there is. The top right-hand corner is the old Market Square and the fabulous parish church, which they know as the Stump. The next slide.
So 1 minute warning, Amanda.
Oh, right. Okay. Very, very briefly. This is all the at-grade car parking, public, private, etc. Next slide. This is all the cars. Next slide. And the brilliant stump up there. This was the site identified around here, which had single-story buildings, retail buildings, and a wonderful pedestrian bridge to the marketplace, the railway station over to the left, and no coherent wayfinding between the two. So we propose the next slide. Quite a lot of moving all the car parking out as much as possible and getting a linear green space in here, which actually linked up between the river and still made a meandering connection to the railway station, but it got everybody a lot closer, brought a whole lot of different uses into the town centre, connected with and supported the existing town centre, plus gave them a really important sort of semi-rambler green space there. And I think the next slide's the last one. Clicking onto that one. So just a visual connection of how this could be developed. I think there might just be one more. And yes, we're back to Notre Dame. So thank you very much.